Once a special operative, Han Fong had unexpectedly crossed into the primitive era, trapped in the body of a child barely a year old. Here, not only did hunger strike 3 days out of 9, but he didn't even have a decent scrap of clothing, yet he did not falter. With the experience of his former life, survival in this world of stone and bone was nothing insurmountable. At this moment, several women wrapped in animal hides were watching him curiously. Han Fong ignored them, picked up a sharp-edged stone, and sliced open the wound on his ankle where a snake had bitten him. Then he pressed a burning branch against the gash. 3 blood-curdling screams tore through the cave before Han Fong collapsed to the ground. He could only hope his instructor hadn't lied that high heat could denature the proteins in snake venom. After a night of dancing on the edge of death, he awoke the next morning alive, stubborn and unyielding, like a cockroach. One of the women handed him a strip of dried meat. Han Fong devoured it ravenously. Seeing he could still eat and drink, she called to a few others to prepare for their daily tasks. Han Fong quickly held her back, signaling for more food. The woman shook her head. Of course not, this tribe had no more than 50 members, and food was scarce. With winter looming, every morsel was being hoarded. Rations were given first to adults strong enough to hunt and labor. The weak and crippled, like him, would be the first abandoned when starvation came. The thought made his blood run cold. The air was already growing sharper with each breath. If he didn't secure food for winter now, death was inevitable. After much thought, he realized the easiest meat source was fish. Less than a kilometer away, a small river flowed. But the tribe didn't eat fish, they had no tools to catch them. All he had was the stone knife he had used on his wound and a 3-meter strip of snakeskin from the very serpent that had bitten him yesterday. He cursed under his breath and set out to find tools, planning to gather vines to weave into fish traps. In this untouched ecosystem, the river had likely never been fished. There had to be plenty. Not long after, Han Fong returned to the cave mouth carrying a bundle of vines. He immediately began weaving baskets. Children crowded around, babbling and pointing, unable to speak clearly but fascinated. The women, meanwhile, were spreading Kagone grass out to dry near the cave entrance, grass that would serve as their bedding and blankets during the cold months. Just then, a distant scream split the air. Following the sound, Han Fong saw the tribe's bearded chieftain and 2 men clutching enormous bird eggs as they ran. Panic etched across their faces. Behind them, a piercing shriek rang out. A giant terror bird, over 3 meters tall, was chasing them down. Han Fong shouted, "Throw the eggs away." But no one understood his words. The chieftain refused to part with his prize. The monster was relentless. In moments, it caught him, its beak stabbing down in a killing blow. The chief died instantly. The 2 other men, terrified, dropped their eggs and fled into the forest, scrambling up trees to safety. Back at the cave, the children, who had never seen such horror, wailed uncontrollably. The cries drew the terror bird's attention. With its prey gone, it wheeled around and charged straight for the cave. The women grabbed the children, including Han Fong, and dragged them inside. Together they heaved a massive boulder across the entrance. When only a narrow gap of 30 centimeters remained, the bird's monstrous beak stabbed through, but its huge body couldn't fit. For the moment, they were safe. Still, the children sobbed in fear. Han Fong barked, "Shut up! Any of you cry again, I'll throw you out there." They didn't understand his words, but the ferocity in his voice froze them into silence. The terror bird screeched in frustration, unable to move the boulder. At last, it gave up and stalked away. Cautiously, Han Fong crept to the entrance and peered through the crack. The clearing was empty except for the chieftain's corpse, where the giant bird had returned to tear into flesh. Han Fong clenched his teeth. This beast had to die. Han Fong ground his teeth. This beast had tasted human meat. Now that it knew the tribe's location, they would never be safe, but he had no weapon. Fighting it with wooden sticks would be suicide. Then, staring at its long legs, inspiration struck. He grabbed 2 fist-sized stones, tied them to each end of the snake leather strap, and fashioned a crude sling. Slipping through the gap, Han Fong emerged from the cave. The people inside gasped in shock. Some wanted to stop him, fearing he would lure the monster back. But all they could do was watch in anxious silence. Hiding in the bushes, Han Fong crept closer, stopping when he was only 6 meters away. The monstrous bird was still feasting. Unaware of the assassin drawing near, Han Fong stood, spinning the sling. The stones whirled faster and faster, the strap taut under centrifugal force. The bird sensed movement, lifted its head, and shrieked. Then it charged. The women and children inside screamed, urging Han Fong to run. But he stood still, unshaken, like a statue. When the bird was only 30 meters away, he released the sling. The strap whipped through the air, wrapping tightly around its legs. Just 10 meters from Han Fong, the monster stumbled and crashed to the ground. Its small wings flapped wildly, but it couldn't rise. Gasps of disbelief echoed from the cave. "Now!" Han Fong shouted, beckoning 2 boys. They rushed forward, pinning the bird's neck. Han Fong hefted a boulder and smashed its skull. Blood sprayed everywhere. The beast convulsed, then lay still. The 2 boys, excited by the sight of fresh blood, joined in, pounding its head with stones until it was lifeless. The children stared at Han Fong with awe and respect. Calmly, he retied the snake leather strap around his waist and motioned for the boys to help drag the carcass back. The 3 of them hauled the enormous prey to the cave. When the tribe saw it, they could no longer contain themselves. They rolled the boulder aside and rushed out to help. The 2 hunters who had escaped earlier climbed down, having witnessed everything. All were filled with admiration. This was the first time the tribe had ever captured such a massive prey. Han Fong told the women to keep the feathers, then returned to his weaving. Within an hour, he had finished 2 baskets. Stuffing the bird's entrails inside, he set off for the river. One woman followed, unwilling to let him go alone. The 2 boys, who had begun calling him Big Brother, trailed after, curious to see his next invention. At the riverbank, Han Fong watched the water. Within minutes, he saw large fish devouring smaller ones. Predatory fish lived here, but the ecosystem was rich. The water was clear to the bottom, teeming with life. He placed bird entrails in the basket, tied it with grass rope, and lowered it into the river. The scent of blood spread quickly. In a 20-meter radius, fish swarmed, shoving each other to get inside. Han Fong yanked the basket up. Inside were 4 large fish, yet the others below didn't scatter. They fought over the remaining scraps. Han Fong laughed. Like feeding carp in a park, again and again, he lowered and lifted the basket. Each time, fish filled it. By noon, they had caught over 200, the largest weighing 10 pounds. The children carried them back in groups. When the adult hunters returned with only a few rabbits and birds, they were astonished by the sight of such a bounty. That evening, the tribe gathered for the funeral of their fallen leader. His body was placed atop a pyre of wood, lit by the elder who wore goat horns. Flames consumed the corpse, casting shadows across the faces of the tribe. Children sniffed at the smell of roasting meat, saliva dripping from their mouths, showing no grief. The adults, too, were calm. They had new food. Han Fong seized the chance to observe. Among all the warriors, only Poison Fong and Daluk were known as the strongest in the tribe. After burning the old chief's body, night fell, and under the elder's guidance, everyone entered the cave to share food. Since the tribe had never eaten fish before, today Han Fong was specially given a portion. He picked up a roasted fish, took a bite, then carefully showed the others how to eat it, how to pick out the bones. The people imitated him, eating happily. Perhaps because this was the first time they'd ever eaten their fill, laughter and singing filled the cave. They ate and danced with joy. Watching the scene before him, Han Fong suddenly felt warm inside, as if he were back home. In his heart, he swore, "I must lead this tribe to a better life." When the meal was over, the elder, wearing his goat horns, took a charred stick and drew the scene of Han Fong catching fish on the cave wall. Meanwhile, Han Fong taught the women how to weave baskets. He added straps to turn them into backpacks, so they wouldn't need to use animal hides to carry fruit anymore. The women loved the design, eagerly taking turns trying them on, reluctant to let go. They decided that the next day they would gather more vines to make their own. To thank Han Fong, they gave him 2 of the finest deer hides from the foraging team. Thus, he became the first child in the tribe to wear clothes made of animal skin. But Han Fong wasn't selfish. He kept one hide and gave the other to mothers with small children, telling them to sew clothes for the little ones. In this harsh, primitive age, where even a fever could claim a child's life, a hide was worth more than gold. It was a chance to survive. Han Fong believed that if he ever needed their help, these women would not forget his kindness. The next morning, Han Fong rose early. After practicing his military boxing routine, he felt thirsty. But when he looked at the communal stone basin of drinking water, he hesitated. Sharing like that wasn't safe. It's time to make water containers, he thought. Soon, the tribe stirred awake. But today, they weren't preparing to hunt. The elder gathered all the adult men on the open ground outside the cave. In his hand, he held a headdress woven from green feathers, the symbol of leadership. It was time to choose a new chief. Han Fong turned to leave. He was still a child, not of age, unqualified to participate. But just as he took 2 steps, Poison Fong called out, pulled him back, and pushed him toward the elder. Han Fong was bewildered until the elder gestured and explained. His strength had already been recognized by all. They wanted him to compete for chief. Han Fong's heart tightened. So this is the chance. Only as chief can I truly lead them. The rules were simple: no weapons, no crippling strikes. Whoever proved strongest would become chief. The duels began. Poison Fong and Thursday Na fought first, trading punches and kicks. Though Poison Fong was not as strong, he was agile. Soon, he found an opening, tackled his opponent, and pinned him. Thursday Na struggled but couldn't break free. Panting in defeat, Poison Fong roared in triumph, raising his arms. Both celebrating and provoking Daluk, Daluk immediately stepped forward. Towering nearly 2 meters tall, his presence was like an iron fortress. Poison Fong felt overwhelmed, but still charged. Before he could land a blow, Daluk's massive hands clamped his shoulders. With a bellow, Daluk hurled him several meters away. Poison Fong crashed to the ground and couldn't get up. Excitement spread. The crowd roared, ready to welcome Daluk as the new chief. But then, wait. What about me? Han Fong stepped forward and snatched the feathered headdress from Daluk's hands, a few feathers falling to the ground. Enraged, Daluk pounded his chest and roared furiously, but Han Fong showed no fear. Instead, he gripped the headdress tighter and, using the tribe's limited language, declared to everyone, "I defeated him. I am the leader." The crowd gasped. They didn't fully understand his words, but no one objected. Under the astonished eyes of the tribe, Han Fong and Daluk moved to the center of the clearing. Daluk bent down, glaring at Han Fong, who only reached his chest, with eyes full of confidence and contempt. The children shouted encouragement for Han Fong. Without hesitation, Han Fong charged. He stepped on Dai Luke's thigh with his left foot, pushed off, and drove his right knee hard into Dai Luke's chin. Before anyone could react, Dai Luke crashed to the ground, rolling and groaning. The entire tribe was stunned. Dai Luke was their strongest warrior, yet he had been defeated in an instant, and by a boy not even of age. The elders suddenly felt a surge of emotion. Though baseless, he had a strong premonition: this child could make the tribe powerful. Before he could act, the people lifted Han Fong high and cheered for their new chief. In just 2 short days, Han Fong had brought miracles to the tribe. The elder picked up the feathered headdress. A relic passed down through countless generations of chiefs, now damaged. He was troubled: how should the new leader appear without it? What he didn't know was that Han Fong had broken it on purpose. He would never wear a ridiculous bundle of green feathers. Dai Luke, recovering somewhat, suddenly rushed at Han Fong again. Han Fong leapt down from the crowd's arms, seized 2 of his fingers and bent them forward sharply, slipped behind him, and kicked the back of his knee. Dai Luke collapsed, writhing in pain. Within 2 minutes, the mighty warrior was crying and begging for mercy. Han Fong dusted off his hands, left the sobbing man on the ground, and strode back into the cave. The crowd erupted once more. Children shouted in joy: the first time someone so young had beaten an adult. Women chatted about asking their new chief to teach them basket weaving. The elder stared at the cave entrance with complicated feelings. Moments later, Han Fong reappeared with a new look: a simple deerskin tunic, long black hair tied neatly with a snake leather cord. Clean, tidy, and dignified, he looked every bit the leader. This was a style he had carefully chosen, inspired by ancient Han farmers of the Shang and Zhou era, who tied their long hair for convenience and labor. Under the admiring gaze of the tribe, Han Fong began organizing work, sending women to forage, having pregnant women stay home to care for toddlers, assigning children to pull weeds, and putting Lu Tu in charge of smoking fish. Then he built a pottery kiln, taught the people to shape bowls, jars, and pots, and fired them. That day, the tribe harvested an abundance of fruits, birds, snakes, chestnuts, and fish. Everyone rejoiced: they no longer feared hunger. That evening, they feasted on clay-baked meat, though Han Fong silently wished for more salt to improve the flavor. The next morning, he opened the kiln. To his delight, the pottery had succeeded: red, glossy, watertight. The tribe was awestruck. In the past, a single stone basin could take a lifetime to make. These clay vessels were priceless. The elders set out to trade them with a neighboring tribe, bringing back salt and even new people. The elder, however, grew uneasy. Each new discovery: roots, peppers, weapons, clay pots, was something no ordinary youth could know. He wondered if Han Fong was truly human, or perhaps some spirit sent by the heavens. But his doubts were drowned out by the tribe's joy. To them, Han Fong was a miracle worker, a leader chosen by fate. One afternoon, a child suddenly collapsed with fever. Panic spread. In the past, such illness almost always meant death. Women wept, preparing for the worst. But Han Fong acted swiftly. He boiled a pot of broth with medicinal herbs he had secretly recognized, then performed scraping therapy, running a polished stone along the child's back until the skin reddened. Within hours, sweat poured from the boy's body, and the fever broke. He sat up, weak but alive. The tribe gasped as if witnessing sorcery. From that day on, their reverence for Han Fong grew even deeper. Life in the tribe flourished. Men carved bones into spears and daggers under his guidance. Women wove sturdier baskets, learning new techniques from their chief. Children were given tasks suited to their strength, no longer idle. The cave filled with smoke from drying meat, clay pots lined the shelves, and the people's bellies stayed full. Yet Han Fong did not stop. He began experimenting with fire-hardened wooden stakes, teaching the warriors to hunt in formation. Together they tracked a herd of wild boars and, after fierce struggle, brought one down. The tribe feasted again, cheering with newfound confidence. For the first time, they felt they could stand against the dangers of the wilderness. Then came the great hunt for the giant tapirs. Massive as bulls, with thick hides and tremendous weight, they were terrifying beasts. But under Han Fong's command, the warriors fought bravely. Spears struck true, and after exhausting battle, 2 colossal creatures fell. Processing them took the entire day. Meat was sliced thin and smoked, fat rendered into white jars of oil, hides set aside for tanning, and bones stored for weapons. The blood was carefully drained into jars, salted, and stirred until it thickened into nourishing pudding. By nightfall, the racks were heavy with meat, the jars full of lard and broth. The children munched happily on crispy fried fat, while even little Kuben, once sickly, ate with glowing cheeks. The cave roared with laughter and song. The elder sat apart, gazing at Han Fong. His heart was torn. This youth had brought miracles uncountable: food, tools, medicine, victory. The tribe had leapt forward in only a handful of days, transformed from hunger and fear into strength and hope. But was such power truly a blessing? Or something beyond human comprehension? Han Feng himself gave no sign. He simply smiled, quietly planning the next steps. For in his mind, this was only the beginning. After the feast of taper meat, the tribe lived in abundance for several days. The once constant fear of hunger vanished. For the first time, the people ate until their bellies were round, chewing roasted meat, sipping broth, and even savoring rich, salty blood pudding. Children laughed with greasy mouths, and women smiled as they filled clay jars with rendered fat. The campfire burned late into the night, and the cave echoed with the sound of celebration, but Han Feng knew this would not last forever. Salt, in particular, was dangerously scarce. Without it, their food would spoil, and their strength would fade. He resolved to seek out new sources, even if it meant venturing deep into the unknown wilderness. The next morning, he led a group to explore the valley. They discovered sweet, starchy roots hidden beneath the soil. Roasted over the fire, the roots gave off a fragrant aroma and tasted soft and sweet. The tribe cheered. Another reliable food source had been found. Han Feng's keen eyes roamed constantly. He noticed a small thorny plant with bright red pods clinging to its branches. Curiosity stirred within him. Plucking one, he split it open to reveal tiny red seeds. He placed one on his tongue, and fire exploded in his mouth. Tears welled up, but he laughed. Chili peppers. This would transform their cooking. He immediately ordered the seeds gathered. Back at the cave, women learned to crush and dry them. When sprinkled into soup, the fiery spice made even plain meat taste irresistible. Soon after, Han Feng discovered another treasure. At the edge of the forest grew a tree covered with clusters of long, thin, needle-like fruits. He plucked one and twirled it in his hand. Its tip was sharp, like a natural arrow. Han Feng was overjoyed as he reached the arrowhead tree. The name of something suddenly flashed in his mind. He used his carrying basket as a target, tied several strands of grass to it, and threw it into an area covered by tree branches. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen sharp thorns had stuck into it. He pulled the basket back, removed the thorns, and repeated the process until he had gathered 2 large bundles. Then he carried them out with the tip of his spear. On his way back to the tribe, Han Feng collected another 100 young devil tree saplings, each as thick as a thumb. Their trunks were perfectly straight, excellent material for making spears. He called over 4 kids who were picking chili peppers, and together the 5 of them dragged the saplings home. When they returned, the children gathered around, curious to see what their leader had brought back. However, to the pregnant women of the tribe, everything Han Feng brought seemed useless. The chilies were too spicy to eat, and the sticks weren't thick enough to kill prey. But that didn't dampen Han Feng's good mood. He still needed to upgrade his own weapons. The thorns, once peeled, were smooth and hard, about as thick as a cigarette. If made into arrowheads, they would become heavy arrows. Their range would be shorter, but their piercing power much greater. As for the thumb-sized saplings, their wood was hard. After fire hardening and sharpening one end, they'd make excellent hunting spears. With their current tools, he could only make a large, heavy bow, but one that would still be powerful. In the forest where he had hunted wild boars the day before, there were plenty of good materials. He just needed to find wood flexible enough for the bow. What stuck in Han Feng's mind most, though, was the aloe plant he had discovered while hunting. Its leaves contained plenty of fiber, perfect for making rope, weaving cloth, or sewing clothes. It wasn't as good as flax, but much better than animal sinew, and far more durable. Even better, its sap could treat wounds, reducing inflammation, detoxifying, and cooling fevers. Thinking of this, Han Feng decided that next year he would grow aloe on a large scale. Then the tribe would have clothing and could reduce deaths from infected hunting wounds. Han Feng went back to the wild boar forest and luckily found 2 fir trees that had been knocked down by some animal. They had dried out, perfect for making bows. It took him an entire day to prepare the stone adze and another to carve the wood. At last, a 1.5-meter bow took shape. He spent 1 more day polishing and smoothing it to perfection. The bowstring was made from fibers of the devil vine. The arrows used the same sharp thorns as tips, and the fletching came from the blue feathers of a giant bird. In one afternoon, Han Feng crafted more than 200 arrows. 3 days later, he gathered everyone on an open field. 30 meters away stood a straw target, with several freshly caught field mice hanging from it. First, Han Feng demonstrated by throwing a spear. Each throw from 30 meters hit dead center. Then he showed how to thrust with the spear at close range. The tribe cheered excitedly. Now they understood what their leader had been doing for days, creating weapons. Except for the smallest children, Han Fong gave everyone a spear, each hunter got 3, 2 for throwing, 1 for close combat. The children nearing adulthood were told to train daily, throwing spears between weeding sessions and playtime. The new fire-hardened wooden spears looked beautiful, and the tribe loved them. Besides throwing stones, this was now their only ranged weapon. Han Fong believed that before long, they'd be able to hunt much larger prey. If the spears excited them, the bow amazed them even more. It was almost sacred. From 100 steps away, Han Fong shot 5 arrows in a row, all striking the target. Mice, everyone gasped, pushing and shoving, desperate to touch the divine weapon. But Han Fong only demonstrated it was too hard to make, so he didn't distribute any yet. After the spears were fully introduced, he began making shoes. 2 black wild boar hides, after repeated tanning, became tough and springy. He made sure everyone got a pair. His own shoes were fully boar hide, while others had boar hide soles and uppers made from smaller animal skins. For Kuben, the child, Han Fong made the boots himself, knee-high, lined with fur, warm and soft. The boy proudly showed them off every day, but soon, the tribe's limited supply of animal skins ran out. The weather was getting colder and warm. Clothing was desperately needed. If they didn't have hot soup every day, many would already be sick from the cold. Now, each person in the tribe had 3 bowls, and they had plenty of pottery. So pottery making had stopped. Han Fong gave Lu Tu a new task, brick making. Once they had enough, they could build a larger kiln, maybe even walls and houses. The kids' weeding task was almost done. The 80 acres outside the cave entrance were now cleared. They could build or plant there later, though no suitable seeds yet, just some chili peppers. The devil vine was perennial. Han Fong planned to plant it on the mountain and harvest once a year.